Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's week 63. And more importantly, it is my 2-year anniversary at BGW. So here's the funny thing is you guys are ramping on. I arrive on my first day at BGW and my office is filled with balloons. And some people that knew me knew I would love it. Those who didn't know me were wondering, uh-oh, is she going to be mad? Oh no, I wasn't mad. And so what was really cool is one of my colleagues about 2 days later, so I put them all on in my shelves. I didn't have any books in my shelves yet. And I put them up on my credenza and everywhere. And one of my colleagues comes in and he is so excited because one of his former clients had come. He had joined us a few years before. And one of his clients had come from this other firm and he was really excited because he really loved them. And I said, pick a balloon and we're going to pop it. And so that started this tradition where we celebrate as a team when we have a new client that comes on. So, if you want a balloon, let us know. We've got plenty of them. So anyway, as you guys are getting on here, you know the drill. Q&A is where your questions go. We got a few already, and believe it or not, PPP questions are still lingering. And I know Jack has some additional fun facts for us. And one other observation, if anybody else is noticing this or not, but I think COVID attire is starting to wane because we're all wearing collared shirts. So that's a sign that things are coming back. So anyway, Jack, I'm going to throw it back over to you first, and then we'll go into, I'm sure Adam has a diatribe ready to roll too. So Jack, go for it.
Sure, happy to do it. So a couple of things. First, if you haven't heard, PPP applications are done. They finished 3 days early, which is really kind of irrelevant for two reasons. If you waited until past weekend to put in your application, shame on you. And it was a holiday weekend, so I don't know if anybody was really working on Friday anyway, so you had to have your stuff done already before then. So moving on and kind of transitioning into what else is kind of interestingly going on. And how about the fact that there is a proposed $1 trillion plan out there. There's actually several plans, and the Republicans and Democrats are fighting over numbers and different programs. But I thought I would give you a sampling of what is in first of all, the American Rescue Plan, which is the 1.9 trillion, which was already in motion, which is where the next kind of relief package, PPP money and other stuff came from. So that's a given. But then there's two other components: the American Jobs Plan, $621 billion for transportation, bridges, roads, mass transit, airports, $111 billion improving drinking water infrastructure, and providing billions more for expanding broadband access and updating electric grids, which is interesting. I mean, a totally tangent thought is, the issues with, our infrastructure, just technology and ransomware and all this other stuff that we are reliant upon. So, part of that is you're like, okay, do we really need to fix some things and spend this money on some things? We have a lot of vulnerabilities because we've allowed ourselves as a society to become dependent upon certain things. And so, people are going to take advantage of that. $300 billion for assisting manufacturers and small businesses, capital improvement, clean energy, workforce development. And then there's the American Families Plan, 1.8 trillion, and things like 225 billion in subsidized child care, family and medical leave programs, 200 billion new education funding, 80 billion enhancements to the IRS, which this is a good way of getting money, which is saying, hey, what's your return on investment? 80 billion in enhancements to the IRS, which the administration estimates could raise 700 billion from high earners and corporations that evade taxes. So yeah, let's invest 80 billion to get a $700 billion return.
9x return.
Yeah, exactly. You can't argue with that. Right. And so what does that mean for us? Well, marginal tax rates are going to potentially increase, more so for the higher earners. Corporate tax is likely going to increase because, how else are we going to pay for these things? So it is traditionally, how do you get more money in the U.S. Treasury? Well, you got to get it from somewhere, so you're going to get it from the American people. So, and that's not a political statement. That's just a fact that, you can't, well, you technically could print money, and then you have inflation issues and value of the dollar, et cetera. So just some highlights on that. And so there's other things we can talk about, but SBA I did see one more thing. I did see a statement by the top officials at the SBA that they are looking into continuing to refine their process so that the forgiveness applications will be processed more quickly. I've seen that they're pretty much done with 2020 numbers and number crunching and forgiveness. So really they're focused on 2021. So if you're still waiting for forgiveness on 2020 funds that you receive, then you probably should look into that, because it's a high percentage. It was like 97, 98% of those loans have been forgiven. And so they're focusing on 2021 funds that have been distributed and dispersed.
Perfect. Adam, what's on your mind?
A couple different things. So I wasn't going to mess with Gary's graphic because it is funny. But, as a libertarian, I will point out that Republican complaining about deficits is completely based on who's in power in the executive branch. Because, just the fact is most deficits have been run up under Republican presidencies, under the auspices of, hey, tax cuts will spur the economy and that'll pay this back. And that's been pretty much economically disproven by every credible economist that's out there. So my point in saying all that is that, please don't get all, I'm panicked about the fact that we have a lot of debt, but I've been panicked. I love the tax cut that Trump gave us and knew that we couldn't pay for it. So it was like, it felt to me like spend it on a credit card, maybe. It's like, felt really good to buy something at the time, and I knew at some point I'd have to pay all that back. So it, and we're just kind of seeing the consequences for that. So, on the tax side of the equation associated with what Jack was just talking about, with respect to the budget that was proposed, the couple things that were not great about the tax proposal. And when I say not great, I mean, I'm taking off the, Adam as a U.S. citizen, concerned about his children having to pay mounting deficits back, and putting on my hat of Adam as a taxpayer and a tax consultant saying, well, that sucks. So the couple things that sucked about the proposal that are going to impact, a lot of people that are on this call, number one is, I don't think this dog stands a chance in hell of hunting, but, Biden said the capital gains tax increase is retroactive from the date that I announced it, which was in April. And that was in theory to prevent a market sell-off from the point that something becomes active. I don't think that stands a chance in hell of ending up in any kind of final proposal. And that's simply based on the fact that it never has. So I'd have a hard time seeing that one go all the way through. But, he put it out there that it would be retroactive. I think every pundit believes that it won't be, and there could be a triggered sell-off because of it. I think the second thing that was in there, that, he pushed around the periphery during his campaign in his initial tax proposal, but didn't give any details around it, is to start taxing business owners more on loopholes that were great. We exploited them all day long. One of which was on the S corp not having to pay Social Security taxes. So, he would change that to where S corporations would now have to pay the Medicare surtax, just like partnerships do. So S corp loophole potentially goes away on the Social Security taxes. And then, obviously on the wage base of having Social Security taxes kick back in again, that would still be there. So just, there are some things that are going to be negative to business owners that if you factor out the capital gains component by itself, I think what we told everybody is that if there's going to be a tax increase, expect that it's going to be between 8 and 10%. And that is exactly how this is playing out. Is when you look at all the pluses, minuses, whatever, for the average business owner, this is about an 8 to 10% increase in what you're paying today based on how all this stuff is currently shaken out. I think my own, prognosticating is if they go down the path of having a compromise deal that actually gets passed, I don't think we'll see a lot of punitive things with the legislation. In other words, I don't view enforcement of the existing law as punitive. They should have been doing that all along. In other words, like, oh my God, we're going to get caught for breaking the law. It's like, okay. I used that excuse before a judge once when I was a teenager to justify my speeding ticket. Well, but nobody was around. Nobody got hurt. Okay, well, it's still against the law. As the judge laughed at me. So never defend yourself. I'm not too worried about that piece. What he also did keep in there was, the dead people tax, but the way the dead people tax was going to work based on this proposal was just clarifying more that, you would be taxed on the residual gain that's built into whatever you inherit, so that there actually is you won't get a step up in basis. You get taxed on what you inherited as your basis. No different than if it was a gift. Rightly or wrongly, kind of makes sense to make it align with, if I give Jack my Apple stock when I'm alive, he gets it at my basis. But if I do the right thing and die, he gets it at my date of death. So it's like, I don't like it, but it kind of makes sense to harmonize those two things and make them consistent, so that at least there's one level of capital gains tax that occurs at some point during somebody's lifetime. Then I think, the last thing that's in there that, I think won't impact us, and I haven't really done the breakdown too much in terms of like, what are all the revenue, where are all the sources of revenue to pay for all this stuff and then start closing the deficit. But, the one that really stood out to me was having bringing back effectively a corporation minimum tax, which would be a minimum tax on book income, which kind of gets back to, what I was ranting about, a couple webinars ago, which was, I swear I'm a libertarian, by the way. But
you wonder at times.
The whole. I know. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. The whole. We got to keep our corporate tax rates competitive with other jurisdictions. Yeah, I totally get that. At the end of the day, Duke Energy, again, God bless them, great company in North Carolina. Love their headquarters. They're a big employer. At the end of the day, they had a negative 28% tax rate in 2020, and it would take them over 50 years to pay the taxes that they deferred up to this point. 50 years. So that what would be imposed would be a corporate minimum tax of 15% based on book income. There's some other stuff in there too, but it basically boils down to, no more 2% effective rates for companies that are really making an economic profit anymore. I could see that. I could see the step up in basis going away if I was betting now that a combined proposal would pass. Because then if I'm a Republican, I could say, I kept the corporate rate at 21% intact, which is true. And the rate that companies will have to pay as a minimum tax will be lower than what they would have had to pay at 21% because it's only 15%. So that's that piece. I think on the employee retention tax credit front, same advice as last week. Nothing really changed there. But if you weren't on the call last week, that you've got two paths the employee retention tax credit. Path A is, hey, I clearly qualify, down 50% or down 20%, depending on the year. But path B, which is the not down 50% in 2020, but disrupted due to a government shutdown, still, no more better guidance on that front. So just again, unless you're on life support from a cash flow perspective, the important thing to remember now is to get your PPP application for forgiveness right, maximize the non-payroll cost bucket first, then put everything else in payroll. So then you're at least preserving the ability to use the employee retention tax credit as they bring out more guidance. But just a reminder, for any quarter in 2020, based on the IRS statute of limitations, it's not like money's running out. You got until 2024 to go back and get that money, which, last time I checked, it's 2021. So that's a long way of saying that, there's not a huge rush on this unless you're on life support and need some cash.
All right, we've got a couple questions. Actually, so Mike, I told you I'd get to this one at the front end. So at 11:17 a.m., we're going to get to it. So couple questions, and these deal with ERC, and then we've got a couple other things worth talking about on PPP, and I'll go into that next. But so here's the question. This is ERC. We've calculated our tax credit due to us for ERC for 2020. It's about $250,000. Also in 2020, we had about 180,000 in deferred payroll tax. 90 of this will be due on 12/31/2021, and 90K 12/31/2022. Is there a way to apply this credit in such a way that it would use the credit, the deferred payroll taxes due at the end of this year? That's question one. Get to question two.
They had not from what I'd seen, they hadn't worked out. That makes logical sense, but they hadn't worked out the mechanics of how to make something like that work. So I would stay tuned on it. I mean, logically that makes sense, but there's not mechanically, a way to get that done that I'm aware of today.
All right, next question related. We're thinking we should use a form 941X for each quarter of 2020, Q2, Q3, Q4. If we do this, when do you think we would receive the cash?
Everything that I've seen said it might be 6 to 7 months. So it's not quick, because the other form is for the current quarter that you're in or a future quarter. So it doesn't, you can't go back to 2020 with, I think it's form 7200 or 7400, whatever the advanced credit form is. You got to use a 941. But again, I don't know of anybody that's received cash back yet from the 940 amendment process. And again, the stuff that I've been watching said, hey, they're really busy, might take a few months, which in my mind means don't count on it until tail end of this year. Maybe we'll be surprised.
So here's another scenario that came across our bow this week from a fractional CFO that's seen this with a couple times with clients with one of the top 10 largest banks. They will remain unnamed. And so here's the scenario. Have you guys seen banks step in front of the SBA on forgiveness to tell clients that their original application and check amount was overstated because they should have used their 2019 941 rather than the 2020 8-week formula prescribed by the SBA during the application process? Therefore, they're not entitled to full forgiveness and have a residual balance to either pay back or finance. And which is something that neither of us had seen. I went to Jack, went to Adam, neither one had seen that with anybody else. So I went to one of my favorite bankers who is with that particular bank and said, hey, what's the deal? Are you guys seeing this? And he said, yeah. He said that, quite frankly, they're rejecting a ton of forgiveness applications, and that the bulk of them are resubmitting these forgiveness applications with additional justification for full forgiveness, which is interesting that he said that, because ultimately it's not about forgiveness. This was in question, was the amount. You were granted more than you should have, because you should have used this form instead of that formula. And so I said, what's going on with that? And he said, big targets are under big scrutiny. And he said, we're just getting really conservative about that because of that. So if anybody out there is running into that, we'd love to hear about it. That was the first that any of us had heard of it. And evidently in this particular bank, it's running somewhat rampant.
And I would say as a follow-up comment to that is that, remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about, the get out of jail free cards for the banks. And so, it got to a point where, if you recall, even further back, that the banks were very delayed in acting and reacting. And part of that was because they were waiting for the federal government to give them the indulgences, an old Catholic term, for basically getting forgiveness in advance, right? And so that didn't happen to the extent that they wanted it to, but there was so much pressure by all of us borrowers that said, let's go, let's go, let's go. And the SBA and the Fed said, okay, this is kind of the extent of what we're going to go to. And they're kind of now coming back and saying, well, okay, now we've taken care of the more obvious low-hanging fruit of people who have, fraudulently, for example, bought Lamborghinis with money, and that was given to them. And so now they're going back. And so the banks are saying, wait a minute, we better do some CYA ourselves. And so I think that is what we're seeing. I have not seen, as you know, when we talked about it, I have not seen that particular issue personally with clients, but I imagine that is a result of the phenomena of the federal government getting a little tighter down and getting to the ones that it's like, well, let's take a look at the B list of potential infringers of violators. So
here's an interesting situation. So here's the scenario. I've applied for forgiveness twice, have not necessarily been denied, but I have gotten alerts saying I need to apply again. I've applied 3 times and I have no idea why. Also, our loans are not very high. My question to you, Jennifer, would be, are you with a big bank or a small bank?
Yeah, that probably would be dependent. I would agree with you on who
Oh
the
boy,
bank was.
Well, unfortunately, Jennifer, that is exactly who the bank we were talking about. And I also heard this from Robert Mayetta. So Robert, same deal. It's the same bank that we were talking about. This is what Robert said. Again, I'm trying to, keep from disparaging this bank in particular, but they tried to refigure the beginning calculations of the PPP. I pushed back and was able to substantiate the amount. Then we got 100% forgiveness. Oh, that's great, Robert. You stay in the ring and fight. So good for you. That's good to know. So that should be encouraging, Jennifer, because Robert is with the same bank and he pushed back hard. So don't just roll over, it sounds like. Any other questions out there?
While we're waiting, I'll throw out 2 more things. That one is good news, one is bad news. So I'll start with the bad news, which is really the same news. So same as it ever was, essentially. That I looked again at the the progress or lack of progress on the Senate bill, which at this point would require people to amend their tax returns. But as far as the parity on taxation of amounts that were received and it's still being taxed. The good news is on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and I had some numbers up here that okay, there it is. So the money got used up pretty quickly. So you have $75 billion in applications and only $28.6 billion in funding. There were more than 362,000 applications. And this is actually through the end of last week before the holiday. And so, but the SBA has said that they are optimistic that there is going to be more money infused into that, but I have not seen a specific allocation into the RRF fund. And it sounds like that they are talking about that both on the Democratic and Republican side of things within, obviously there's a disparity between the number trillions and billions, but at least my understanding is that is in both of the plans to put more money into that restaurant revitalization fund. So I have some clients who did were fortunate to receive some of that money. And it is, it's just, I don't want to say a godsend, but I mean, it is significantly helped them get to the next step and not be just totally going into the summer season with problems. I guess that another thing is that there remains an issue on employment, and there have been some discussions on modifying the unemployment benefit, which is basically to take it away as being an unemployment benefit, but a bonus for getting employment. That is essentially a bonus that is subsidized by the federal government to give incentives to get back into the office, whether remotely or physically. But and so kind of reversing the incentive to sit on the couch because you make as much or more money. And so that's another thing that's likely going to come down the pike in these as they pass these new plans and infuse money into our economy, essentially. So just wanted to
So
share
what do
those
you
things.
think the deal is with the Senate? Like, why in the world? I mean,
I think that they are concerned about, it's all the things that we've talked about in the past too, that you throw all kinds of stuff in there that are important, and you have people whispering in the legislature's ears about this is important, this is important. So and the reality is it's all important. For example, bridges and infrastructure. It's like, well, okay, literally some people say, well, it's not broke, so don't fix it. Well, it just hasn't broken yet. When
right. Maintain
you drive,
it.
Yeah, exactly. You just because you can drive over it doesn't mean it's not, it doesn't have issues and needs normal maintenance. So, and I've seen reports as to just even in North Carolina, the status in South Carolina of our infrastructure, our roadways, et cetera. And so important things, but I think that the rub is that, okay, let's take smaller steps and let's not try to do all of this at one time and create this huge bill for the American people. And the other side is, well, we need to move each of these pieces forward. We can't just say we're going to push this one this far and then only push, this one this far.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the North Carolina Senate. This is a simple, like, pass the stinking thing to follow everybody else and the federal government so that these guys can deduct those expenses. What the heck is going on? Driving me crazy. So CJ, that's yeah, we discussed it a little bit last week. That's what we're talking about now. Still nothing new. So if you can find your senator in North Carolina, light them up.
Well, and it's kind of, again, remember, I'm a libertarian, and David Borax accused me now of becoming a journalist. So this is my cynicism coming through. Look, it's classic playbook. They're gonna get a massive revenue inflow that they weren't counting on, disguised as we have a revenue shortfall. Remember that if I use my PPP money to pay Jack paid taxes. Only person double tax anybody around here is the state of North Carolina. So they have this massive revenue inflow that they weren't planning on. You know what I can do with that? I can change the corporate income tax rate in North Carolina down to 0. I just gave you a tax cut, aren't I a hero? That's what.
You think that's what's going on?
Well, that actually is the proposal that they put forward. Like they didn't relate the two. They didn't say, because we have this huge inflow, here's what we did. But they, there has been a proposal floated out there to phase in a reduced rate for individuals and a reduced rate for corporations, eventually taking corporations down to a 0 income tax. It's like, we got to pay for that somehow.
Yeah. Tim, we're just laughing at your chat.
Probably.
He did that in buying big soft pretzels with cheese in them at VBGB.
That's right. That's right.
Hey,
tell you what,
speaking of that,
go ahead.
I was just thinking, we ought to do a little contest with these faithful followers or, people that are tuning into us instead of, some cable news show or whatever. Since PPP continues to kind of flitter down, we still want to keep talking in, this click and clack type format. We truly want to answer your real-time questions for free and provide value. But I think we need a catchy name that's short, succinct, gets to the point. And I think it'd be kind of fun if people would submit ideas and then we could give, a cool BGW notebook that I go through at least 2 of those a year right here. And then Jack, I could volunteer Jack's Starbucks card for somebody who gives us a great idea. So just thinking that,
I've got all kinds of swag that I can our marketing director is right down the hall. And she was on vacation last week and I had to grab some stuff. And she was like, where's my stuff? I'm like, gave it away.
Thief down the hall.
Yeah. But here's also, okay, so let's do a current giveaway. I purposefully, about 5 minutes ago, used a line from a 1980s song. You have 10 seconds.
Gosh.
10 seconds. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, 10 seconds. Because that's probably how long it takes if you kind of heard it. And then if no one gets it in the next few seconds, I'll even tell you who the band is.
All right, tell us the band.
Talking Heads.
Man.
See,
evidently,
I don't expect you guys to get it because you guys are thinking about, okay, we're kind of co-hosting this thing, but the people that are listening in should have heard it. Like if you're an 80s and you're, know about Talking Heads, it would have just clicked because as I was saying it, I was actually hearing it being said as the song, like the lyrics.
People were probably just at the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A getting some of those great French fries. I don't know.
All right. See, I'm keeping people on their toes. All right. We will.
Oh.
Oh. Yeah. You should say that one because I've actually had. There was we had another event like that was called that on purpose for just to be fun about it. But yeah.
Oh, Robert, you're creative too, man. So this is Robert's suggestion for the new weekly event name, the Weekly BS, where BS stands for BGW and Shoemaker. That's pretty funny.
Yep. We've had a BS events with another company that began with a B. And so, yes, I actually have some, I don't have them here. We had some glasses, little beer mugs printed up. And so it was a big thing. So.
Well, there's, I suppose, some of that in there involved in this too.
Mhm.
So, all right. Any other questions out there? You guys are light on the questions today. If it wasn't for Mike sending us that stuff in last night and our fractional CFO sending us some stuff. All right. Any parting thoughts or last minute questions? But while we're waiting for a question, any parting thoughts, Jack, Adam?
Thomas said, if you don't got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. So
Nah.
probably.
Yeah, I think we pretty much said
Sign
as
off
much
for
as we need to
today.
say. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do the official sign off. All right. There we go.
All right. There you go, Gary. Nice.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right,
Thank
see
you.
Bye.